Good morning and a warm welcome to all of you to the National Conference on Investor Protection, Education and Awareness brought to you by ASSOCHAM. I'm your host for the day. My name is Tanishala Yardhapan. I would request all of you to please take your seats. We are beginning now. Our chief guest, Dr. Subhash Ramrao Bhamre, is on his way and will be joining us shortly. And we will start with a very engaging session on how to develop a thriving securities market today. So I request all of you to please take your seats and clear the aisles so that we can start. I request you to please bring your cup of tea or coffee to the table. You will have ample opportunity to mix with your peers, your friends and catch up with them. We have adequate tea breaks, lunch, networking lunch session as well. In the interest of time, so that we can start, I request all of you to please take your seats and clear the aisles. A few house calls and announcements before we start. For an uninterrupted and enjoyable experience, I request all of you to please put your phones on silent. If there is an important call that you need to take, please step outside the hall and take the call. There will be a few question answers that may follow the panel discussions that we have. If you have a question, please stand up, raise your hand, identify yourself and the speaker you're asking the question to, and then proceed to ask the question. Now we would like to kick-start the proceedings with the lighting of the ceremonial lamp. For an auspicious start to the event, I would request our esteemed dignitaries to please come forward and light the ceremonial lamp. I would request Shri Nehal Vora, Managing Director and CEO, CDSL, to please come forward to light the lamp. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri Nehal Vora. I would request our other dignitaries to please join him. Shri Suyash Sharma, Director, Physical Share Solution Private Limited. Shri Nitin Jain, AVP, Valuation and Investment Banking, Resurgent India Limited. Shri Love Chaturvedi, Chairman, National Council on Capital Market, ASSOCHAM, and Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, Reliance Securities. Shri S.C. Agarwal, Senior Member, Managing Committee, ASSOCHAM, and CMD, SNC Global Securities. And Shri Hitendra Mehta, Senior Member, Managing Committee, ASSOCHAM, and Managing Partner, Central Legal, to please join in to light the ceremonial lamp. Auspicious beginning of the conference. I would request all of you to please take your place on the dais. I request all of you to please come up on stage and take your place on the dais. We'd like to inform all of you that Shri V S Sundaresan, Executive Director, Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, will be joining us virtually, and we will have the privilege to hear from him all the efforts that SEBI is putting in for investor protection as well as education. So please put your hands together for all our esteemed dignitaries who are on stage now. Trust and awareness is very important for investors. And through the day today, we will delve deeply into the mechanics of developing a thriving and vibrant securities market. I have the privilege and honor to welcome Shri Love Chaturvedi, Chairman, National Council on Capital Markets, ASSOCHAM, and Executive Director and CEO, Reliance Securities, to please give the welcome address. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri Love Chaturvedi.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Welcome, everybody. It's really heartening to see the room full after a long time. It's been a few years. So good to have you guys over here. I would like to welcome Mr. V S Sundaresan, Executive Director, SEBI. Thank you, sir. Would also like to welcome Dr. Subhash Ramrao, Honorable Member of Parliament and Member of Parliamentary Standard Committee of Finance, and would like to welcome my fellow DICE members, all the participants and guests. One round of applause for everybody, please. Thank you. It's been interesting times for last few years, like I mentioned. Interestingly, the challenging times have converged into business as usual. There has been so many challenging times for recent years that now we call it business as usual, and there is never a dull moment. Be it the geopolitical situation, like Russia, Ukraine, and now Taiwan, and God knows where it's going to go. Be it the interest rate hardening, which is happening worldwide, globally. In fact, we just got our interest rate increase 50 basis point a few minutes ago. And so there is a hardening interest rate environment, and there is a quantitative tightening where the liquidity is getting absorbed. We also have inflation. That's again the worldwide issue, and it's impacting us domestically as well. And worldwide governments and central banks are trying to control inflation. We also have other markets such as currency market, which are also taking toll because of these issues. And notwithstanding our capital market, which also has been volatile in past few months, especially 6 to 9 months. However, I must say, the Indian market has been the most resilient of the all, and it really good from the stability perspective. However, I was just congratulating Nehal. Apparently, CDSL had just got 70 million demat accounts, and overall, India will now have over 100 million demat accounts. So that's a big round of applause for the retail investor. We have to keep one thing in mind, that these retail investors, which is now 100 million, which probably is going to be around 70% more than what it used to be just a few years ago. So that's a huge jump. Now, these investors actually entered the market when the interest rate was benign, when the liquidity was ample, and when the worldwide, the central bank and government was pushing for this stimulus. Over the period of time, the tides have turned, especially in past few months. We know the FPIs have been pulling money out. Apparently, according to me, I think they have pulled out almost what they have brought in over the last 5-6 years, but we surely expect that to probably reverse pretty soon as well. It is extremely important for the market to probably have the confidence, have the trust, and have the sustainability that can be taken forward. If we see from the volume perspective, Indian capital markets have one of the highest volume. I think it has grown 2 to 3x times over the last few years. India will be the top 5 countries in the world with regard to the economy by 2025. It is already the 4th largest capital markets in the world. It is already the 3rd largest unicorn startup ecosystem in the world after US and China. That means there is a lot of activities which we are going to expect in capital markets to come over the next few years. India is going to be $5 trillion economy over next few years. That means the $5 trillion market cap. We just spoke about the 100 million demat account holders, which not that long ago, we were looking at 1, 2, 3 million as like a big jump. I would not be surprised if this 100 million becomes 200 or 500 million, because even at 500 million, it will still be just 50% penetration of the telecom. So it's still a long way to go from where we can go from here. Obviously, one thing I must say, that Indian market have been extremely safe. Is actually one of the safest market in the world, and has been extremely resilient thanks to our regulator and thanks to the government. And what it requires, I think, at this point of time is that we need to ensure that these retail investors needs to be sustained and needs to grow. And actually, we also need the institutional participants and FPI to come back, and there should be a much wider participation in our market for its sustainability. How that can be accomplished? According to me, I won't take much time. We have fellow DICE members who is going to give us probably inputs on each of the theme that we have today, but I will just wrap it up saying that there are 4 things that, according to me, would probably take us to the next level of pride, I must say. One is definitely the ease of accessing. Second is the ease of accessing across asset class. Simple products, that's the key. Keep it simple. Very disciplined approach to the investments. And lastly, which is the most important, is the investors' confidence and trust. And investor confidence and trust would come if they are protected, they are educated, and they are aware. So with that, I would like to probably now switch over, not taking much time, and I know we are in the time shortage. I will switch over. I will request Mr. V S Sundaresan, sir, to please give us your views and your guidance. Sir, over to you. Can you hear us, sir? Mr. Sundaresan, can you hear us? We need to get that? Okay, so please. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chaturvedi, for that address. We will come and speak with Shri Sundaresan as well, and we will check the audio before we do that. We will check his audio and his connectivity with us. In the interim, I would like to request Shri Nehal Voda, Managing Director and CEO, Central Depository Services Limited, CDSL, to please address the audience. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri Nehal Voda.
I would like to wish all of you a very, very good morning. Ladies and gentlemen and esteemed guests, I'm truly humbled and deeply grateful to basically ASSOCHAM to invite me at this very important national seminar on investor protection, education and awareness. I would like to also welcome Shri V S Sundaresan, Executive Director SEBI, a veteran at SEBI who has always been at the forefront in ensuring more and more market developments happen in a very fair and transparent manner. Shri Rajesh Dangeti, the Regional Director SEBI at Delhi, and all the distinguished panelists. When I talk about investor education, awareness, and protection, it sets me thinking about a very important saying by the famous martial art and celebrity Mr. Bruce Lee. He says, all fixed set patterns are incapable of adaptability and pliability. The truth is outside all fixed patterns. This quote is very, very relevant in today's times, as the world has gone through a very different phase, what it has not seen in probably the last 1 or 2 centuries, or probably never in its lifetime, about a very widespread worldwide pandemic which has changed the way of thinking, the way of doing business, and the way we communicate with each other. The old normal, which the world took for granted, is gone forever, and a new normal has been forged in its place. This new normal is characterized by an unprecedented technology transformation. The transformation has brought new ways of thinking, new ways of doing business, virtual meetings, online platforms, online purchases, and an increased use of technology in operations are the order of the day. What has this had an impact on the capital markets and the securities markets? One such impact has distinctly been observed in the Indian capital markets and securities markets. The participation and the access of the Indian securities markets has become convenient only due to the cutting-edge technology infrastructure provided by the market infrastructure institutions, which apparently was probably the only industry which did not stop for a single second even when the national lockdown was going through. So I think it deserves a huge round of applause. Shows It shows the vision of SEBI in the 1990s to move from a physical mode to an online mode, and the way it has kind of been executed by the market infrastructure institutions, that when the pandemic took place, not only did everybody at these institutions work from home, the intermediaries could work from home, but also the investors could work from home. So this has led to the entire technology growth, which has kind of ensured that all these important stakeholders could continue to remain safe from the comfort of their homes, but could continue business as usual. At this, I remember a very famous saying by Swami Vivekananda: all the wealth in the world cannot help one Indian village if the people are not taught to help themselves. This is a very, very important quote in today's times, because today, as MIIs or market infrastructure institution, under the overall guidance and supervision of SEBI, we are trying to promote the Atmanirbharta, or the self-sufficiency of the investors. That everybody should be educated enough to see and understand what they have and use that to ensure that they are fully empowered when such platforms take place. So it is this power of technology which is helping investors become Atmanirbhar. And the reference with the earlier speaker, Lav Chaturvedi, made on the number of demat accounts or the number of participation is just a kind of a byproduct of this entire ethos in which we are trying to work. On the course of the pandemic, the adoption of technology has been tremendous, and the market infrastructure institutions have been working to meet the needs of the technology maturing Indian investors to accelerate their digital Atmanirbhar journey. The Indian capital markets had seen about a 200% increase in the number of investors since the pre-pandemic period. So what was supposedly a kind of a downturn was an opportunity in the Indian securities market. This signifies not just the increase of the interest of investors in the securities markets, but also, as I mentioned earlier, the successful efforts of SEBI and the MIIs to provide a trustworthy, secured, and easy to access of the markets. This growth has been all-encompassing across age groups and social strata. 68% of demat accounts are held with investors in the age group of 20 to 39 years. There has been an increase in participation of investors from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. We have also observed an upward trend in the number of investors with limited sources of income, like students and housewives, join the ever-increasing family of investors. This is a reflection that people from all diversities, geographic, demographic, gender, professions, are now recognizing the Indian securities market as an investment option. While these trends are overwhelming, every investor to check his or her savings through the comfort of his mobile phone or through his laptop in a secure manner. The second is the use of RegTech or regulation technology. What this has entailed is that today, MIIs are using sophisticated technology to ensure that the markets remain safe and secure, and these kind of untoward elements are put to book in terms of whatever crimes which is being committed. And the third and the most important, which I think is the most crux of this conference, is the DIY or do-it-yourself investor services. How do I empower every investor to not rely on anyone else but himself or herself? How do we empower everybody to start looking at their savings themselves? I often compare this, that when a normal housewife is comfortable buying the household things, or a student is happy buying it from online platforms like Flipkart and Amazon, then why can't we have Why is there a block in seeing your own savings, which is a multiple times in terms of its quantum, which is being put in the securities markets? There are various tools which all MIIs have put in. From the depository space, we have something called Easy at CDSL, where you can check your demat balances as many times a day you want. There is e-nomination, e-CAS, e-voting, EDIS. So it's kind of E, which means it's electronic, but most importantly, it is elementary and it's easy. And that's what E really refers to. And that's where the investor protection becomes an extremely important, and the education piece becomes an important component in ensuring that more and more investors are able to imbibe this. To conclude, the capital markets and the securities market is a great leveler. The market does not discriminate on the basis of the background and the investor. All men, women, rich and poor are equal in front of the market. However, the market needs to be respected. This respect comes from responsibility, knowledge, as well as the education. In the end, I'd like to end my speech with a quote from Mr. Nelson Mandela. I'm fundamentally, basically an optimist. Part of being optimist is keeping one's head pointed towards the sun, one's feet moving forward. So the important thing is that sun is the transparency and the education. Markets will keep on moving forward. And this is a very important theme which we all need to take in place. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Voda. You've said something very important. The empowerment of investors is very important. And I'm sure when there's trust, empowerment will flow through. And trust is created by regulatory authorities. And we are very, very privileged to have with us Shri V S Sundaresan, Executive Director, Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri V S Sundaresan, who is joining us virtually. Good morning, Mr. Sundaresan. Can you hear us?
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. We are all awaiting to hear you. I hand over the mic to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning to all of you. I thank the office bearers of ASSOCHAM for inviting me to this conference. I'm sorry that I could not come in person due to certain official exigencies, but because the office bearers were insisting that I should participate in this program, I agreed to join through the digital mode. So I thank ASSOCHAM for accommodating me for that, and I also thank all the people and dignitaries and the participants there to listen to me. As rightly pointed out by Mr. Chakravarti in his opening remarks, that the world economy is going through a very challenging times. We all know that the COVID pandemic created a havoc in everyone's life, but we somehow learned because of technology, telecommunication, and all those support systems that we can continue our life, both personal and business, without disruption. But suddenly, when the pandemic was almost coming to an end, we felt a sigh of relief. But another issue started with this geopolitical instability. So when one geopolitical instability was happening and we were almost getting adjusted to that ecosystem, yesterday we are seeing another type of geopolitical development taking place. So these type of developments are really, creating some sort of a problem in the mindset of not only in the investors but in the entire ecosystem. Now, adding to that, when we are, participating in this conference, the RBI monetary policy has been announced, and the interest rates have been increased by 50 basis points. But as we all understand the way the market behaves, when the interest rates are increased, the market has to actually react adversely, and the Sensex or the Nifty is likely to come down. But if you see what is happening is that 0.5% there is increase in the Sensex and Nifty. So when this type of developments takes place, it is really difficult for any a common investor who has to find out why this type of developments take place and what is the reason behind that. So here comes the importance of awareness and education being imparted by this type of conferences, as well as by the the regulator, the industry, as well as by the investors on their own. So having said that, as a regulator, we have our mandate given in our act itself that providing education to the investors is one of the parliamentary mandate given to the SEBI. So what we do is that we undertake various programs either directly or through the market intermediaries or the investor associations, and conduct various awareness programs all over India to make the investors aware of the do's and don'ts. Similarly, SEBI has been coming out with various schemes, to train the resource personnel, and then we, with the help of those resource personnel, SEBI conducts training programs, awareness programs, and also the imparting very important education on the securities market developments to the various market participants, including the investors. Now, why this financial education becomes more important is that one hand, there are challenges which are happening in the ecosystem which is beyond the control of the regulator or by any person. The second development is that, as rightly pointed out by Mr. Nehal Vora, that digital transformation is actually adding to a lot of uncertainties. Whatever we have learned thinking that we have knowledge on technology maybe a few years back, today we find that those technology is almost outdated and new things have actually taken place or come into force. And then we will have to constantly update ourselves, and then only will be in a position to cope up with the challenges ahead of us. Similarly, on the other hand, what happens is that in addition to the regulatory changes which we are bringing out and this digital transformation which is forcing the people, the education assumes a lot of significance. So as an investor, if the person is not taking steps to improve himself and not making himself aware of it, there is a possibility that the person will be left behind, and then we start getting more complaints. So SEBI, the one way of assessing whether the investor awareness is improving or whether the investor education is actually resulting in any sort of positive impact, SEBI has actually undertaken a study on the various complaints being lodged and also the level of grievance redressal which is being done through the court system. As most of us assembled here will be aware that SEBI has a online complaint redressal system where an investor can log in his grievance, and SEBI takes up those complaints with the concerned intermediaries or the listed companies and tries its best to resolve the complaints. Now, when we undertook that survey, the survey has given some sort of an interesting findings. Some of them basically says that almost 75 to 80% of the investors are aware of the electronic mode of getting redressal of their grievances. So that itself shows that most of the investors who are actually operating in today's securities market are aware of the digital transformation, and they are aware of the score system, which is purely online, where the investor can see what is his update of his complaints and where the complaint is and what type of redressal is being done by SEBI or by the concerned intermediary with whom he will have a grievance. So another aspect of the study shows that the people are not very keen to lodge a physical complaint, and they actually make all the attempts to log in and try to get their grievances redressed through the electronic system. So this is another important finding for us, is that as we have been moving towards dematerialization or bringing all those policy measures by which physical transaction will be eliminated, because as long as the physical movement of physical transactions take place, it has its own deficiencies and it creates further problems. So therefore, it is heartening to note that investors are more comfortable with adapting new technology and also willing to go ahead with the technological transformation. So at this juncture, this type of awareness programs are very helpful, and in a sense, the investors will come to know what are the recent developments taking place and what type of adjustments they have to make so as to adapt to the new developments. Having said that, it is not that it is only the job of the regulator or the market intermediate, infrastructure institutions who basically cater to the interest of investors. The industry is also expected to play its own role. See, the industry also has to take the complaints which are being lodged by the investors very seriously, and they also have a very, what you call, move towards more friendly mechanism in redressing the grievances. As we all know, a few years back, we are having problem with these, mobile phones where there were lot of call drops were taking place due to various reasons. Now, the industry definitely, came forward, understood the problem, and tried to address the grievance of people like us who were all using these mobile phones. Similarly, the industry, which is, like whether it is a corporate entity, whether it is a broker, whether it is any intermediary in the system, should also respond to the investors' grievances and also, do their best to avoid mis-selling. Because most of the problem arises today where the grievance happens because of mis-selling. The investors' risk profiling is very important. The industry is expected to know what type of product is suitable for what type of person. We all know, what type of issues we have been facing with one particular bank which has sold certain products which were not actually meant for retail investors. But somehow the marketing people have, camouflaged the product for the purpose of maybe earning commission or whatever be the objective behind that, sold that product to the retail investors. And then when that particular institution got into some sort of a liquidity problem, the entire retail investor fraternity, faced a dilemma as to how to liquidate that investment and get money. And most of the retail investors were left inside a lurch, and they were not getting the return or even the principal amount because of various regulatory developments, because the product was not actually meant for the retail investors. So the industry is also expected to play a responsible role so that the education which we are all trying to impart helps the investor to understand what is the risk attached to a particular product and understand whether that particular product is useful for him or is he capable of absorbing the risk arising out of subscribing to that product. So, one hand, the protection of investors can be done only by empowering them. As rightly pointed out by Mr. Nehal Vora, any empowered investor is the protected investor. We cannot simply go on telling that, we will protect. It will not be possible for anybody to protect the investors unless we ensure that the investor is empowered, he is made to understand the do's and don'ts of dealing in the securities market, and then making him aware of his rights and responsibilities. Because as an investor, it is not that he cannot expect that every time we will protect him. It is also his responsibility to understand, come to this type of conferences or programs, understand what are the changes taking place in the securities market and adapt himself to the new changes, and also take care of his investment, because it is ultimately his money, whether an investment in an IPO, whether it is an investment in a secondary market, or it is in a mutual fund unit. It is for him to study the risk profile attached to a particular product and choose whether that product will be meant for his risk appetite, whether he is able to absorb that type of risk if anything goes wrong with that, and then take a call. So the education and awareness, once a person goes through, will empower himself to see whether to where he stands and see whether he is protected or unprotected. So I see that in this conference there are specific sessions on specifically on the how to invest in financial products, what are the opportunities and challenges, and also the way forward, what type of in education and protection is going to be done, which will be more helpful in the days to come. As as I said, SEBI has been doing a lot of things, and we have our SEBI's regional director from NRO to chair the next session, and I hope that he will be able to throw more light on the various steps taken by SEBI, and also what are the new initiatives we have, which will help the investors to understand the intricacies of the market much better, and which will help themselves to get protected. So I once again thank the office bearers of ASSOCHAM for giving me the opportunity to participate in this conference and sharing my thoughts with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sundaresan, for taking the time out and addressing the audience here. We all appreciate your thoughts because all investors look up to SEBI for their protection and for trust. Thank you so much for joining us. I would now like to request Shri Nitin Jain, EVP, Valuation and Investment Banking, Resurgent India Limited, to please address the audience. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri Nitin Jain.
Good morning, everybody. I feel really privileged to be part of this panel and to be participating in this conference in with regards to protection, education, awareness of investors, right? So I think this topic is really need on the hour, where the SEBI and the government is really looking forward to kind of increase the pool of investors and increase their overall confidence in capital markets, right? Now our panelists and government and regulatory authorities, they are doing really great in terms of building this confidence and kind of making an ecosystem where every investor who is looking at different asset class to actually feel that this is something that which it can approach and ultimately benefit in the long run and contributing to the economic as well, right? So our panelists mentioned about the importance of technology in protecting the interest of the investors and making them more aware about the nitty-gritties of the investment process and managing their portfolio overall, right? I will just take a bit of back step and try to make and say that the investor should be made aware about the ecosystem of investment before actually it becomes an investor. So any awareness that is created towards the investment ecosystem should begin at a very early stage where somebody is not actually looking to invest anything, but maybe want to kind of explore more about the ecosystem, increase their knowledge, and eventually decide on the investment, right? So, during my, interaction with a lot of investors and the people who are looking at this ecosystem, I feel a lot of these are not really, do not understand the step-by-step approach, right? I was recently interacting with one of the technology companies who was working towards increasing this awareness. And the kind of solution they have built is that if somebody is, studying in a college or starting his first job, they were, connecting the transaction of this particular person with the little investment towards mutual funds or any other asset class. So what nutshell was happening that the person is not really investing, but kind of contributing to the ecosystem in a very, little manner, where he's not actually feeling that, he's contributing a good amount of money as income or its pocket money towards certain, asset class, but to actually participating in a way so that he better understand the ecosystem, he better understand the things that he needs to be aware of, and understand ultimately how it will benefit him. So he, in a nutshell, becomes the part of that ecosystem, and gradually once he reaches, kind of a situation where he's, kind of making his family, now looking at the investment products in a very more serious manner, That's where he becomes more aware and take a very, cautious decision that which is the asset class which is more favorable to him, and ultimately, what can he pursue in the long run to benefit his overall financial returns. So, before somebody, looks at to be participating in investment products, he needs to be aware and feel that, okay, whatever he is looking to do in the long run, he can very well manage that, and technology is there to help them to each every step where he can, connect with regulatory authorities and, even, connect with their, distributors, actual mutual funds, or any other organization who can actually tell him that, okay, what is the path that he can, really pursue in the long run. So in my working, my interaction is with a lot of technology developers, lot of practitioners who are looking at a different aspect of the overall ecosystem. So investor protection, awareness, and ultimately benefiting from it is ultimate goal, but there is a step which needs to be taken well in advance, so the long-term journey is actually fruitful for the investor, as well as is, kind of giving very great insight to the regulators and government, so that the overall ecosystem can be developed in much better way, and ultimately, kind of benefiting the economy and helping in achieving our vision and goals. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. I would like you to please welcome Shri V S Sharma, Director, Physical Share Solution Private Limited. I request him to please address the audience and tell us about how product innovation is also leading to trust amongst investors.
मैं सभी का धन्यवाद करना चाहूँगा और एसोचैम की तरफ से कि उन्होंने इस तरीके का एक सभी के लिए ये प्लेटफॉर्म जो दिया है इन्वेस्टर एजुकेशन प्रोटेक्शन से रिलेटेड में, चूँकि हम एक ऐसे प्लेटफॉर्म पे काम कर रहे हैं या ऐसे कहें कि जो फिजिकल शेयर सॉल्यूशन जो है एंड इन्वेस्टर से जुड़ा हुआ है और उस एंड यूज़र की जो एक प्रॉब्लम कह सकते हैं जिसमें सभी रेगुलेटरीज और सभी कंपनीज जो उस इन्वेस्टमेंट से एक रिटेल इन्वेस्टर तक जुड़ी हुई हैं। शायद हमारी आवश्यकता इसी वजह से हुई कि एक जो लेमैन इन्वेस्टर है, आज भी हिंदुस्तान में ये है कि उनको ये एक नॉलेज नहीं भी है कि हाउ टू डीमैट आर फिजिकल शेयर्स। हमारे पास में एक जनरल इस तरीके की क्वेरियां आती हैं लोगों की, तो इसी वजह से फिजिकल शेयर सॉल्यूशन की 2015 में स्थापना की हमने और रिटेल इन्वेस्टर और कंपनीज और रेगुलेटरीज इन सब के बीच में एक सेतु की तरह हमने लोगों को सेवाएं दी। जब कभी भी रेगुलेटरीज कोई भी इन्वेस्टर के हित में रूल्स रेगुलेशंस लेके आते हैं तो बहुत ज़रूरी हो जाता है कि उसकी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन भी आगे चाहे कंपनी स्तर पे चाहे रजिस्ट्रार स्तर पे क्या वो इम्प्लीमेंट हो भी रही हैं कि नहीं। शायद सभी रेगुलेटरीज को सभी को इस बात का ज़रूर मालूमात है कि इम्प्लीमेंट होने में कहीं ना कहीं कोई ना कोई कमी ज़रूर रहती है। मैं सभी का ध्यान आकर्षित करना चाहूँगा इस बात पे, क्योंकि अगर जब हम बात करते हैं रिटेल इन्वेस्टर की और रिटेल इन्वेस्टर के हित की, तो हित और भी कहीं शायद बैकग्राउंड में, क्योंकि कई बार हम आगे बहुत आगे बढ़ जाते हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी स्तर पे बढ़ जाते हैं, लेकिन शायद एक उस लेमैन इन्वेस्टर के लिए सब वो बातें भूल जाते हैं। क्या वो उन सब चीज़ों से आज पूरा हिंदुस्तान के हर वो व्यक्ति, छोटे से छोटा इन्वेस्टर, क्या टेक्नोलॉजी से उतना अवेयर है? उसके लिए क्या से बेहतर किया जा सकता है? क्या उसकी उन शिकायतों का निवारण रेगुलेटरीज द्वारा किया जा सकता है? शायद पीएसएस की ज़रूरत इसी वजह से आवश्यक हुई। और जब हमने ये सब चीज़ें लोगों से, और लोगों को जब उनके वो पुराने पेंडिंग और वो सब चीज़ें जब उनको रिडीम करके, एंडोर्स करके जब उनको दिया, इवन आउट ऑफ इंडिया इन्वेस्टर्स जो यहाँ से जा चुके हैं, या जिन लोगों ने इन्वेस्टमेंट यहाँ किए थे लेकिन उनके लीगल एयर्स भी बाहर हैं, आज भी बड़ी कॉमन बात है कि वो ये बात कहते हैं कि क्या इंडिया में भी इस तरीके की सर्विसेज हैं? लेकिन बहुत लोग इस बात से डरते हैं और कि वेरी हैक्टिक पेपर वर्क इन इंडिया। शायद हमें उन सब चीज़ों को एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म बनाने की आवश्यकता है, ख़ास तौर से जो हमारे आउट ऑफ इंडिया इन्वेस्टर्स भी हैं, क्योंकि बहुत ज़रूरी है ये सब। मैं शायद हो सकता है कि कुछ अलग बात आज यहाँ इस प्लेटफॉर्म पर रखने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन शायद आवश्यक है। जब हम बात करते हैं इन्वेस्टर एजुकेशन प्रोटेक्शन की, नॉलेज होना बहुत ज़रूरी है। सभी का पार्टिसिपेशन, हम सब की मदद की द्वारा ही हम इन सब लोगों में एक कॉन्फिडेंस, चाहे वो हमारे बाहर बैठे इन्वेस्टर्स हों, चाहे वो बहुत इंटीरियर में बैठे हुए, जहाँ शायद हम शहरों में सब कुछ हमें बहुत अच्छा लगता है, लेकिन शायद हमारी रीच उस जीरो ग्राउंड पे अभी तक नहीं है, या हम अपने वो उन सुधारों को, सेबी ने 2010 से, मेरे को जैसा मालूम है, बहुत तेज़ी से चीज़ों को सुधारने की, चाहे वो रजिस्ट्रार स्तर पे हो, कंपनी स्तर पे हो, रूल्स रेगुलेशंस की बात हो, बहुत अच्छी से और तेज़ी से काम किया है। लेकिन शायद उनको ये फीडबैक भी लेने की आवश्यकता है कि वो इम्प्लीमेंट हो भी रही हैं कि नहीं। तो अंत में यही कहना चाहूँगा कि बहुत अच्छे समय पे एसोचैम ने ये एक इस तरीके का जो प्रोग्राम ऑर्गेनाइज किया है, और शायद एक बहुत अच्छा मैसेज लोगों तक जाए और लोग इस बात को समझ पाएं। सर, धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I would now like to request Shri S.C. Agarwal, Senior Member, Managing Committee, ASSOCHAM, and CMD, SMC Global Securities, to please address the audience. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri S.C. Agarwal.
Good morning, everyone. We have listened every speaker who has spoken before me, including Mr. V S Sundaresan and Mr. Love Chaturvedi, Mr. Voraji, and many more. Everyone has shared their good views and talk about investor protection education. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate ASSOCHAM for holding this seminar. Very timely, it's always timely because lot of investor has been added during this corona period. I think 3-4 crore investor has been added in capital market very shortly. So, they should remain in the system, they should grow, they should not go back. So, we need this protection, education, awareness of this type, that they should remain in the system. For a healthy capital market, it is always better that trust should be created among the investors. Though our regulators are doing very good job, but still many more things to be needed. As we have seen, there are many regulators like SEBI, RBI, IRDA, and many more. But what happens sometimes, they should not be overlapping. So there must be a system that while regulating anything or giving protection to the investor, things should not be overlapped. Comprehensively, it should be discussed, and some mechanism should be there that this overlapping should be avoided in regulations. We know that capital market is very necessary for the healthy economy, because the capital market is mobilizing funds and give to the corporates for, and in this way economy being strengthened. And to have this ecosystem very good, we must have trust in the market, and for creating this trust, we need certain rules, regulations. At one time it was thought that whether there should be a separate legislation for this protection, but still a committee was formed, and that committee has said there is no need to have a separate legislation, but every regulator should be alert, should keep their things in regulations. So, SEBI and all our regulators are doing good job, and I think this ecosystem is quite good. But as I said earlier, but still we should always continuously monitoring whether these things, whatever made the policies, is being working or not. So there are various things which have been observed, that investor doesn't have that kind of awareness, because lot of influencers are influencing their decisions. Lot of on TV we see lot of advisors are giving advice, and lot of WhatsApp messages are floating that recommending some tips, and retail investors sometimes acted on their advice and lose the money. But there should be some mechanism to that investor, that the retail investor or any kind of investor should take their decision not on the basis of all these, but their own study, their own knowledge, and there should be some regulations that kind of advice should be restricted which are wrong. So I think all regulators have to work on that side. Either they should be regulated like influencers and all that, or some WhatsApp messages which is being circulated. So these can be curbed in the interest of the larger interest. Otherwise, I am always saying that capital market for investment purpose is very, very necessary, because it gives you the best return, in the sense beating the inflation. As you have seen many products that in that market it is giving around 6 to 8%, in FD 5 to 6%, and various other instrument, gold instrument is also for a longer period. If you see, it gives you around 7 to 9%, even real estate it gives you around 8 to 12%, but real estate exit is not very easy when you want to take exit is not liquid, that real estate market. So, but this capital market we see for a longer term, as we see the Sensex was 100 in 1980 and it is around 58,000 today, which gives you a cumulative compounding return of more than 16%. So, if someone is not investing capital market due to protection, due to bad experience in past, so that possible great returns he is avoiding. Even our pension funds, they are investing around 15%, but we are talking provident fund and pension fund, we are increasing that limit of 15 to 20%. And our international funds, they are investing lot in India, and they are getting good returns out of capital market. So one has to, as we have created this IPEF, Investor Protection Education Fund, and by the Act, and which in that unclaimed dividend, matured deposits, and like matured share application money and share capital, which are unclaimed for more than 7 years, that has to be compulsorily transferred to the IPEF, and it is been regulated by Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So that it becomes a very, very big fund, and I can say that that fund can be used for creating awareness, early awareness in school, colleges, to the among the students and among the investors, to educate, to create awareness, and even for any fraud being happened to the investor, and so that fund can also be used judicially by having all system in progress. So these things are required to have our good trust in the share market. Moreover, you can say that we invest regularly, and it is being and some investor is having complained, and that investor actually, if he is a very retail investor, so sometimes it becomes very costly. If some company can do not doing good things, and investors to keep his interest want to shoot him. So there is no class suit is there in India as is prevalent in USA. So we should think that class suit can be done by the investor. So it is to have minimum expenses per investor. So that can be thought of, and many more ideas that has been already given by my preceding speakers. And I can say that a investor should invest out of his own savings. He should not borrow funds to invest in the share market, and he should not be greedy. As Warren Buffett said, that when everybody is a seller, you must be a buyer. When everybody is a buyer, you must be a seller. Means that sometimes your friend is saying you buy this, everybody is investing in that particular stock. So you must not follow that herd mentality. And there are you should have a broad-based portfolio and diversified. First of all, if you don't have your own knowledge, you should go for mutual fund, ETF, like these. If you have if you can do research, if you can devote time, and if you can invest directly only, then you must invest in capital market directly. And always you should act like a owner while investing. But means that you should not taking share as an investment, but you must part of that company. You must know that you with a company which you don't understand, which you don't feel good, you should not be invested. So there are certain things while investing you can be careful. I think I must congratulate ASSOCHAM for organizing this seminar, and I am thankful to them for giving me this opportunity to speak. Once again, I thank you all. Dhanyavad.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal. Years of experience have spoken today, and the tips that you have for investors will be very, very useful for how they can systematically invest in the capital markets for the long term and reduce their risk as well. Now, Dr. Subhash Ramrao Bhambre, the Honorable Member of Parliament and Member Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance, is coming from the airport and he's stuck in a traffic jam, and he's likely to join us in our subsequent sessions. So we will close this session here. Before we do that, I will request Shri Hitendra Mehta, Senior Member, Managing Committee, ASSOCHAM, and Managing Partner, Central Legal, to please give the vote of thanks. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri Mehta.
Thank you so much. Dignitaries on the dais and participants of the dais. Just to share with you that when we were structuring this event, this program, this exercise started quite some time back. I, along with S.C. Agarwal ji, led a delegation to the CEO of the IEPF authority in the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and we met with Shrimati Anita Shah, Joint Secretary in the MCA, who is chairperson of the IEPF authority. And with her, we had a long discussion on doing an event on this particular subject, investor protection, education, and awareness. Essentially, when we talk about investor education or investor awareness, and last, the most important, investor protection, we are talking about that retail investor who is investing his small savings into the capital markets in a way that whatever unproductive income is lying in his saving accounts or in his house or in the form of some other monetary assets, he is trying to bring it into the capital market and trying to invest in the productive assets or productive income bearing securities in the form of shares or any other instruments in the market. I completely agree with what S.C. Agarwal ji has said, that when we talk about investor protection, there should not be overlapping. People should be aware if there is a grievance, there is an issue, where should he approach? And there should be a single window. I think this is what other learned speakers also they have communicated. And many a time, this issue was there. We had multiple regulators, particularly before this Companies Act 2013 coming into force. But I think after coming into force of Companies Act 2013, things have, fairly, they have been made very clear who will be the regulator for which kind of securities. Like, for example, listed securities, one has to, take recourse to SEBI, and for others, one can, reach out to Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And in the Companies Act, there are provisions also for this. Many investors, most of the investors rather, are not aware. Like when there is an unclaimed dividend, for example, and it remains unpaid for over 30 days or more, so this has to be transferred to unpaid dividend account by the company. And then they have to make disclosures after the AGM is over on their website, company's website, about that unclaimed dividend, names of the persons, nature of amount outstanding. If suppose I did not receive dividend, I got to know that I am holding shares of certain companies and that company has declared dividend, but this has not come to my account. So first thing what I can do, I can check the website of the company. My name should be there. If my name is there, so most of the issues, they stand addressed at the very first point in time. So I need to be aware of the very basic provisions that, like what I am supposed to do. And today's event, I can tell you, this is having a very rich agenda. And if you see the program sheet, we will be not only discussing this small investor issue, grievance-related issues, but then there we will be discussing about investor rights and obligations as well, do's and don'ts, risk factors in investing, basic fundamentals of investment and risk management, then creating a larger pool of informed investors. And there are so many, other issues concerning investors. So idea is that ASSOCHAM, as a responsible chamber of commerce, makes its contribution in having an informed investor who invests in the capital markets, and at the same time he's aware of his rights and obligations as well. As rightly said by our previous speakers also, that investor need to be very clear as to like what is his purpose of investing, like what is the return he is looking for. And rightly said by Agarwalji that he should not be greedy. Supposing I'm targeting a return of 10 to 12%, once I reach that, so I should be very clear in getting out of the that particular stocks. So this is how, I mean, supposing if investors are not aware, so then for them there is mutual fund, there are systematical investment plans. So we actually call it systematic increased participation, basically. So ASSOCHAM is making its contribution to systematically increase participation of the retail investors. And in the end, I would like to just say that regulators like SEBI, RBI, IRDA, PFRDA, MCA, or IPF authority for that matter, they have taken series of initiatives. But then doing investor awareness or education cannot be solely the responsibility of the financial services regulators. As rightly pointed out, that investors also have to be informed, aware of what they are doing. It cannot be said that I was ignorant and I invested my money and my money was lost. So it is therefore important that future depends on what we do today. Likewise, if I want long-term to achieve long-term goals as a retail investor, so I need to decide today. So I should be thinking of education of my children, I thinking of marriage of my children, or some other long-term goals. So for that, we have multiple options, multiple choices. One can start doing that from today. So if we take that first steps today, even if it is small, I think that would be the right beginning. And with this, I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to our learned speakers, particularly Shri V S Sundaresan ji, who's been a very seasoned regulator. I've been having the opportunity to interact with him for over 2 decades. Shri Nehal Vora ji, Managing Director, CEO of CDSL. Shri S.C. Agarwal ji, a very senior Managing Committee member of ASSOCHAM and CMD of SMC Global Securities. Suyash Sharma ji, Nitin Jain Saab, and my fellow chairman of the National Capital Markets, Love Chaturvedi ji. And in absentia, I convey thanks to Dr. Subhash Rao Ramarao Bhamre ji, who's been trying hard to reach this venue, but then I think he'll be here with us in some time. So thank you one and all, and thanks all the participants for making it a huge success. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I would request patience from all of you. Please be seated for a minute longer. I would like to request Shri Rajesh Kumar Dangeti, Regional Director, SEBI, who is with us, to please come on stage. We are very honored to have our dignitaries with us. Please put your hands together and welcome on stage Shri Rajesh Kumar Dangeti, Regional Director, SEBI. I would request all our dignitaries on stage to please release the ASSOCHAM Resurgent India Limited knowledge report about the investor protection, education and awareness. So I request all our dignitaries to please release this knowledge report, which of course will be available to all of you. This is a joint effort by ASSOCHAM and Resurgent India Limited to tell us about what's happening in the capital markets and how it can be made more inclusive, more vibrant and more thriving. Thank you to our dignitaries for doing the honors to release the knowledge report. We will now conclude this session and break for a short tea break, which will just be about 15 minutes long. Since we have only this hall, so I request all of you to please be back in 15 minutes. Bring your teacups to your tables. We'd like to start our next session on time. And a round of applause for all our dignitaries on stage, and we thank them from the bottom of our hearts for coming here and sharing their knowledge with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I request all of you to please take your seats. We are going to go ahead with our first panel discussion, and this is going to be a very insightful one, and we want to hear all our panelists clearly, concise, in the concise fashion that they speak, and we would like you to please cut down on the disturbance. So please take your seats, bring your teacups with you. We are going to start with our next session, and this is on investor education and protection, the way forward. In this session, we'll have our esteemed speakers talk about investors' rights and obligations, the do's and don'ts for investors, the risk factors involved in investing, because we all hear SIP sahi hai, but do we know the risk involved in investing in the capital markets? How to do basic fundamentals of investment and risk management, creating a larger pool of informed investors, and how does one get unclaimed shares, dividends, debentures, and matured deposits. So this one is really critical for old investors as well as new investors who have started investing in the electronic age when investing has become so easy. So please put your hands together and welcome on stage our esteemed speakers. Please welcome Shri Rajesh Kumar Dangeti, Regional Director, SEBI. Please put your hands together and welcome on stage Shri Rajesh Kumar Dangeti. Joining him in this discussion is Shri Professor Vidhu Shekhar, Dean, National Institute of Securities Markets. The NISM has done an exemplary job of coming up with important courses which, when investors undertake them, become very knowledgeable about the capital markets. Please also welcome on stage Shri Suyash Sharma, Director, Physical Share Solution Private Limited. Please put your hands together and welcome on stage Shri Rishi Nathani, Chief Business Officer, Multi-Commodity Exchange of India Limited, MCX. Please also welcome on stage Shri Girish Joshi, Chief Trading Operations and Listing Sales, Member of the Executive Member Committee, BSC Limited. Please put your hands together and welcome on stage Shri Dharmendra Narang, Chief Customer Experience Officer, IIFL Securities, and Shri Nitin Jain, AVP, Valuation and Investment Banking, Resurgent India Limited. A round of applause for all our esteemed panelists who are on stage, who are going to talk about very important issues of investor education and protection, the way forward. I would like to hand it over to Shri Rajesh Kumar Dangeti to take this panel discussion forward. Sir.
Very good morning to all of you. It is indeed a privilege to be among the august presence of all of you. Let me thank the Associated Chambers of Commerce and Industry of India, ASSOCHAM, for calling us here and giving me an opportunity to be part of today. Ladies and gentlemen, let me put forth my views in a very basic way. I will try to set the trend for today's discussion by putting forth in a very basic way, and then probably we all can have a discussion on that. We all are here for the investors. The basic premise that I would try to put forth before you is that the markets are for the investors and of the investors. That's the most important point that probably all of us should keep in mind. We have various kinds of investors in this market. There are people who come here for plain investing. There are people probably for whom it's a job. There are people out there, it's a means of earning additional income and probably saving for their later in the life. But what we need to understand, the most important thing, is the trust which an investor has to have before investing in the markets. As we all are aware, the regulators worldwide have a very basic job which is clearly and uniformly defined. We need to ensure the protection of the investors. As a regulator, we strive to ensure that complete information is available and at the disposal of the investor for taking an informed decision. And in all this, technology has played a very important role to ensure that there is an information parity for the investors. We as a regulator, while discharging our roles, we ensure to oversee the activities and the behavior of the market participants. And the most important part, we signal the investors that you will be treated very fairly when you come for investing in the markets. And when you want to say treated fairly, the most important aspect is trust and confidence, which are very crucial for any kind of financial transactions. Any investor would come and invest in the markets if they perceive that the suppliers of the financial products will keep their promises and not behave opportunistically. That's very important for us to understand. Investors would feel betrayed and become reluctant to invest in a system that seems that if they perceive that it's rigged, or there are some parties who enjoy unfair advantages over others. However, whenever such perception arises, it becomes important for us as a regulator to come forward and restore the investor confidence. As you all are aware, SEBI has been established with the prime mandate of protection of the investors in the securities. It is also mandated to promote and development and the regulation of the market. When does an investor enjoy investing? It's a very important aspect to understand. He knows how to invest. That's the most important part. He has full understanding of the markets. He has full knowledge of the markets. He understands that the market is safe and there are no miscreants. And there are arrangements out there put in place by the regulator that his grievance, whenever a need arises to redress the grievances, it is redressed with full confidence. How have we ensured to take care of the investors' protection? The following strategies we have adopted over a period of time. Over a period of time, we have built the capacity of investors through education and awareness to enable an investor to take informed decisions. And SEBI endeavors to ensure that the investors learn investing. He obtains the relevant information and he uses this information to suit his various investment objectives and goals. He also ascertains his rights and obligations in a particular investment, and he deals through registered intermediaries after taking necessary precautions. And he knows that there is a backup mechanism in case he has got any grievance to be redressed by them. Over the years, SEBI has been maintaining a very well-informed website where all the information that is required for any investor is available throughout the year, and it's updated within few minutes of a new order being passed by SEBI, new law being brought into picture by SEBI, and a new circular being issued by SEBI. As a regulator, we ensure to make available every detail relevant for investment in the public domain. As has been the case worldwide, even SEBI follows a regime of disclosures. Under this framework, the issuers, the intermediaries, they all are necessitated to disclose about themselves, their products, the market, and the regulations so that the investor can take an informed decision. SEBI has been prescribing monitors various initial and continuous disclosures. We keep on monitoring these disclosures, whether these have been made in the right earnest or not. The third I would like to say is that the market should have systems and practices which should make the transactions safe. Over a period of time, SEBI has taken various measures. I mean, there has been a lot of talk in the initial discussions about the way the technology has been embraced by SEBI and how have we been able to ensure that the markets have grown over a period of time. Had we not migrated to a screen-based trading system, I don't think we would have this kind of volumes today. Have we not migrated to a depository system, I don't think we would have been able to innovate by introducing new products. Have we not been able to migrate to a rolling settlement, we would have been caught up in those earlier mechanism. SEBI also ensures that who are the intermediaries who come into the market, we have a very effective gatekeeping. We ensure that all these intermediaries who come into the markets are fit and proper, and they continue to remain fit and proper throughout their life cycle in the markets. In case we find that anybody doesn't follow the rules, we have a very swift enforcement mechanism, and based on this enforcement mechanism, we try to mete out exemplary punishments. The fourth and the most important, which is the discussion for today, is the awareness, education, and redressal of the grievances. We have a highly transparent investor grievance redressal mechanism. I don't think anybody can find a better mechanism in India today. An investor sitting from any corner of the world can lodge his complaint through a mechanism called scores. She can follow up the complaint as to with whom the complaint is pending with, what kind of a status the complaint is showing, what action has been taken, and if the investor is not satisfied with the action that has been taken on that complaint, you have the right to ask for its review. The complaint shall be reviewed, and even after review, you're still not satisfied, you can again come back for a further review. A mechanism of arbitration has also been established over a period of time. The mechanism of arbitration is available with the MIIs, and today it has been also being given to other intermediaries also. So even after the review of the complaint, the investor is still not satisfied, the investor is going to go in for an arbitration mechanism, and there he can ensure that his complaint is redressed. Apart from these things, what is that SEBI has got in its arsenal to ensure investor protection? The first and foremost is the well-defined acts and regulations. We draw our powers from the SEBI Act, the SCRA, the Depositories Act, a part of the Companies Act, and the various regulations that SEBI has over a period of time notified, and the circular that we issue thereunder. Like I said, we have a very good and swift enforcement mechanism. We have a dedicated investigation surveillance team that is to ensure that in case there is any miscreancy being done in the markets, this investigation team and the surveillance team is able to catch up with such miscreants and take exemplary punishment. We have a robust and transparent investor grievance redressal mechanism. We have in the recent past given a clear and precise investor charter. There are do's and don'ts for every investor, for every kind of investing, for every intermediary. Then we have defined also the rights and obligations, not only of the investors, but also of the market participants. There has been some talk in the first session about there being too many regulations. I thought I should talk on this before we start our discussions on this. Yes, there are regulations, but can I ask you to ponder on it? Why have so many regulations come into picture? Let me start off with giving you a understanding of some very basic principles about regulations. Worldwide, many regulators in various jurisdictions follow two kinds of regulations. The basic premise is either you follow a principle-based regulation or you follow a rule-based regulation. In India, we follow rule-based. Now, what do you mean by principle-based and rule-based, and how rule-based requires so many rules and why principle-based doesn't require so many rules? That's the basic premise that I'm going to put forth before you. Principle-based regulations. When you talk about principle-based regulations, it means you move away from the reliance on detailed prescriptive rules and you rely more on high-level, broadly stated rules of principle. Whereas, over a period of time, SEBI, because not only SEBI, probably every regulator in the country have to rely on highly descriptive rules. Pardon me for saying this, but investor protection is not the domain of SEBI alone. The investor protection is the domain of every stakeholder who is there in this hall today. If today SEBI is receiving around 50,000 odd complaints every year, I think you must think about it. Why they are coming to SEBI? Why is it that the intermediary or the MII not ensuring that the investor shall not go to SEBI? We make a rule because somewhere we find that there has been a delinquency. Then we have people out there trying to break this new rule. So in the process, what happens? A new rule is made. Then we have a whole lot of criticism that we have so much inconvenience. There is so much compliance requirements that is needs to be followed. But if we, the stakeholders, ensure to have the highest standards of self-regulation among ourselves, where is the requirement of bringing in a new rule? Please ponder on this. The rules are being made. The more rules you make, probably there are some gaps left there. And when these gaps are left, someone comes in, tries to take advantage of that gap. And because there's a gap there, we come out with a new rule and so on and so forth. So you keep on creating new rules. That's how the entire regulations have been made. Enforcement actions. This is one of the tools we use for investor protection. Something bad happens in the market. There is a manipulation that has happened. Someone has done something wrong to an investor. The regulator has got no choice but to take action. So these actions are taken under the SEBI Act and the various regulations we have made there. I will not talk much on this because this is not probably going to be a very happy topic as such. But just to give you a gist of the kind of or number of actions we take. More than 2,000 orders are passed every year under the adjudication. And around 200, 300 orders are passed under 11B. So all these actions actually show that there are so many delinquencies happening in the markets. I call upon the stakeholders that probably this is the time for you to think about this and reduce those actions. And this can be done only by a lot of self-regulation. While actions are being taken by us, it doesn't mean that SEBI can take actions unfetteredly. No. We have someone called a Securities Appellate Tribunal sitting on top of us. Then you have the Supreme Court there. So many of these orders get challenged. So we are very careful when we pass orders, and we ensure that if an order is passed, we take due care before passing the order. Redressal mechanism, I have had a talk on that, about the scores mechanism. Then I'll talk about something about investor awareness and education. The figures when I put forth before you will show a very good picture. Overall, SEBI has conducted in the last year nearly about 12,000 programs, and we have been able to connect to 5.75 lakh investors. This appears to be good numbers. But looking at the growth of investors, in the first session, we came to know that today the number of demat accounts have crossed probably around 100 million, and a lot of growth is expected in terms of the number of investors. While the growth of the number of investors looks good, the responsibility on the regulator and the stakeholders also increases manifold. We have an obligation, we have a responsibility to ensure that the right path is shown to the investor. He's made aware about his do's and don'ts, he's made aware about his rights and obligations, his risk profiling is done properly, the product suitability is shown to him, and then he's allowed to invest. Investor, once he loses confidence in the markets or in his investments, believe me, it's very difficult to get him back. We have had this situation some years back, but over a period of time, probably the new investors coming back. That's very good. But then we should be very mindful of the responsibility and the obligation that we have. Before I conclude, I just want to take 2-3 examples of how technology has played a role in taking care of the investor requirements. As we all know, the COVID was probably one of the black swan events which had an impact on everybody's life. The whole world took a pause during the COVID times, but probably investment didn't take any pause. You had an unprecedented number of people who came to the markets who wanted to invest. How was it possible that during the COVID times, number of accounts could be opened? That was the time when nobody was ready to meet any other person. How accounts could be opened? That's where SEBI comes into picture. The COVID lockdown started in March 2020. April 2021, SEBI came out with something called an eKYC circular. SEBI facilitated the entire markets to ensure that sitting at the homes, in the confines of the safety of their homes, investors are able to open their accounts and invest. That is the use of technology. The next is the pledge-repledge mechanism. The margining system which was prevalent in these markets was dependent on physical transfer of shares by the investor to the broker's account. It had its own pitfalls, own problems, and in the case of a default, it was creating a huge amount of number of grievances of the investors. What SEBI did in consultation with the depositories, we tinkered the mechanism of pledge and brought in the mechanism of a repledge. Again, the use of technology. Simply by pledging the securities of the investor to the broker's account would not have probably made the system efficient, because the securities would have remained in the broker's account and the entire margining system would have been highly inefficient. So to bring in more efficiency, we said it should be allowed to be repledged to the clearing corporation or to the clearing member. That's how efficiency was brought in. The third example I'll take is the KRAs, the KYC registration agency. Probably SEBI was ahead of its times when you introduced the KRAs in 2011 itself. Government subsequently in 2012-2013 budget, they announced that a CKYC mechanism for the entire market should be set up. While the objectives of the CKYCR mechanism has still not been met, but I'm very happy to say that the KRA mechanism which SEBI has implemented has been able to meet the objective. Today, seamlessly, an investor, when he goes to one intermediary for the purpose of opening his account and undertaking investments in the markets, is able to go to the subsequent intermediary without going through the mechanism of KYC again. In the end, I would like to say only one thing, which probably is very close to my heart. When we talk about investor protection, investor awareness, investor education, I call upon all the stakeholders to consider taking the protection of the investor very seriously. The stakeholders have to take all measures to ensure the protection of their investors, the resolution of the grievance of their investors, and that the highest grade of trust and confidence is instilled among them. We have a saying in India, Atiti Devo Bhava. Why can't the Niveshak be a kind of Atiti to us, and why can't we say Niveshak Devo Bhava? Thank you so much. Please.
You have covered the concept so exhaustively, there's hardly any point left for them to make. Should I make a request that you make it interactive rather than doing something?
Yes, we can do that, sir. But I would.
Chairman of the session, I would make a request to you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Make it interactive so that we
Definitely,
also participate.
Sir. Definitely, we can do that, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Can I request my fellow participants on the dais to say a few words on investor protection, and some of those topics probably which I would request them to cover would be the points on probably something called risk profiling of the investor, a product suitability for the investor, how the role of an intermediary can be improved for the investor protection, how the investor can be made aware of the risks which are there in the markets, how do we harness technology for the investor awareness, investor education, investor protection, and do we think self-regulation would go a long way in instilling confidence and trust among the investors? Can I request Viduji, please?
Thank you, Rajashri. And thank you very much for inviting me here. I would like to thank the ASSOCHAM organizers. Many of you would be aware of NISM, as NISM is an organization that was set up by SEBI and is the primary certification body. We do a lot of different things, but so far we have done more than 16 lakh certifications of intermediaries. So it's a big number. So that's what NISM is primarily known for. But NISM has been very active, working very closely with SEBI on trying to improve the standards of professionalism in the securities markets, as well as building capacity. So we work very closely with all kinds of intermediaries. In fact, I was quite struck by what Rajeshji said, that it's not just SEBI's responsibility to make sure that investors are protected. So SEBI is just, the regulator, and in fact, it's a sign of the failure of the industry that SEBI still gets 50,000 complaints every year. And I think the task before us is to figure out how to bring that number down, right? And we have to do that as individuals, as in firms, companies, and as the system as a whole. So when I first got the invitation to come here, my first reaction was, what are a bunch of people going to do in a, sitting in a 5-star hotel discussing investor awareness and protection and so on. And I'm always happy. I grew up in Delhi, okay, so I'm every chance that I get to come here, I come. So the way I told myself, rationalized my decision, is that no, it's important because this is the place where everybody comes together, and this is the place where we have to have that conversation of alignment so that we work together to improve the way this industry works. Put the investors at the center and find out what needs to be done for the investor. Now, because we are keeping this as an interactive discussion, I'll just make one point, and then I will move it on to my fellow participants. And that is that there is a big difference between the way we think about investor protection in our industry, in the financial services industry, versus, say, you take the pharma industry, or say, how do you provide fire safety? You're not going to, the fire department is not going to say, we do a lot of this disclosure-based, buyer beware type of investor protection, but that is not enough. Because, say, I'll give you an example. If the fire department says that, okay, you put up a board in your building and say that we have no sprinkler system, we have no fire extinguishers, we leave hazardous materials around, and we have told you everything. Now, if you want to come and live here, you can live here. If your house burns down, we are not responsible. That is not investor protection. Now, when you get a very large prospectus, IPO prospectus, what is, through this disclosure mechanism, what is being attempted is actually the protection of the issuer and the merchant banker. Okay, so it is an important part of it. I'm not saying that we should not be doing that, but we should equally focus on, and in fact, SEBI has been focusing on what else do we need to do. And there are two aspects to it. One is the product regulation, just like in a pharma, in pharmaceuticals industry, there are very strict norms of what products can come out and what, how it is to be offered to the patients and so on. Similarly, with the way we do the riskometer for mutual funds, the way in which there are ticket size limits for investments in AIFs, and so on and so forth. There are many different aspects of providing investor protection through the product route. But ultimately, it is the education and professional competence and the ethical behavior of the intermediary which determines whether the client is protected or not. And the best example for that is, say, I go to a doctor and the doctor says that you need to get admitted to the hospital right away. I'm going to put you in ICU and I'm give you this treatment, that treatment. But the hospital is only trying to get money out of you. That is a bad outcome, and that is something that we must prevent from happening in our industry through focus on ethical behavior, through professionalism, through education, and all kinds of competency building measures. So I'll just make those introductory remarks and pass it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidiji. That was quite an insight you gave on probably some of the regulations, that way the disclosure that has been, whether how much effective has been the disclosure regime. I'll now call upon Rishiji to probably say a few things on the same issue that I had raised earlier about product suitability, how the role of intermediaries can be improved in terms of the investor protection, how to harness technology for investor protection, and whether self-regulation by intermediaries how would it help in terms of investor protection?
Thank you, Dangeti and thanks ASSOCHAM for having me here today. Let me give you a parable of a road. I think that's a very simple example of the whole financial services ecosystem. On a road, on the side, there's a pavement which is barricaded off and there are people walking. Then there's a bicycle path. Then there is the main road where the the two-wheelers and the cars run. Within the cars also, you'll have a small, low-cost Nano also, and you could have a high-end Mercedes also. Everyone is running with the same norms. However, the bicycle path norms are separate and the footpath norms are separate. That is exactly what you see as the financial ecosystem. So there are certain norms for small investors, there are certain norms for retail investors, and the rest are, assumed to be aware when you are driving. SEBI's role, and it is very relevant what Dangeti ji is saying about regulation and self-regulation. Now, when you make norms, it's different, and when you expect someone to be self-regulated, it's different. Where on a signal there is a camera, everyone will stop before the stop line. When there's no camera, people will try to jump the red light. So it is all coming down to our understanding, our code of ethics. Whether someone is watching, so what is integrity? Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. So when SEBI is not watching, that is when if you do the right thing, that is what is understandable. Now, intermediaries could be, in the same example, people who are making the road, people who are providing the cars, or people who are providing services like taxis. Now, SEBI's role is to make sure that there are certain quality standards when the cars come on the road. There are certain license norms when someone is driving on the road. So, SEBI is an enabler. We are forcing SEBI to become, cut challans. So, the point is, why do we bring it to that? Why don't we make sure that, you don't get any challans? If you follow the norms, there won't be any challans. And if people follow the norms, it would be that slowly and gradually this so-called over-regulation which we see would also tone down. Because what happens is, it's not that accidents don't happen on the road, but every time that an accident happens, you will see that there will be some measures which are taken to make sure that things improve. And now the road is, a very simplistic example, but here it is an, financial ecosystem. People's livelihoods, their savings depend on it. So that is why it is all the more important that SEBI regulates it. And I'm sure that, not only SEBI, we as exchanges are the first level regulators. There are industry associations who also make sure, and there are representatives from industry associations, Vadwaji is here. They also make sure that the members are made aware of the various norms so that everyone is following something. Now within that road, if people are walking and there's some pickpocket who's picking their pocket, or there are some squatters who are, I would say like dabba traders, things like that, they will be there. Police comes up, rounds them off, but again they come back. So it is, there's no quick fix solution to it, but it is all about bringing it from inside us. And to give this in the commodity ecosystem, because that's where I come from, the commodity markets, we also have various participants. Now in an equity or bond market, you'll have an issuer or an investor. In a commodity market, it is very different because we have a much wider ecosystem. You will have exporters, importers, primary producers, secondary producers, primary and secondary consumers. You will have local stockists, etc. So in ours, I would divide it into three major ecosystems. The pedestrian would be the example of our farmers or small traders, small investors. For them, there are certain norms. SEBI has also foregone its fees for agri-products just to make sure that farmers benefit. So for the pedestrians, a separate walkway has been given. For the other investors, there's like a cycling path. And for the high-end people, like the corporates, they come to hedge. Now, the point is that for all, awareness is necessary. It's not that only the small investor needs awareness. Even the large person driving the Mercedes needs to be aware that if there is waterlogging and he's driving, he should not splash the car on the motorcyclist next to him. So it is very important that we are very aware of each other's understandings, needs, each other's limitations, and we make sure that we act in the ecosystem, that while we take what we need from the ecosystem, we do not take what is for others, and we try to give back to the ecosystem in terms of not only following norms, but make sure that the journey is smoother for everyone else. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Rishi ji. Can I request Girish ji for his views on self-regulation, mis-selling, how technology can be harnessed for investor protection? Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, ASSOCHAM, for organizing this wonderful theme. Of course, a lot of programs are happening on investor protection and education. And as earlier speaker also said, like even Dangeri sir also said, a lot of awareness programs are done by SEBI jointly with stock exchanges. Now, awareness program and investor protection. See, two things are very important. Investor protection per se, SEBI also comes out with a lot of policy, regulations, and even exchange as a frontline regulator also does a lot of things. The question on the awareness part. So awareness part, I'll talk later on, but on the protection part, what even earlier speaker had said on the panel, even Vidhu also said, both on primary market as well as secondary market. Now, what points put out by Dangeri sir, profiling. Now, profiling is done both on the intermediary sides as well as investor side. How it is done? Because if the broker is doing whether proprietary trading, client trading, or algo trading, that way the capital adequacy norms are being prescribed by the regulator SEBI, and the stock exchange ensure that capital adequacy is formed. Same way for the client. And client is a retail client or HNI client. If you are retail client, what are the requirements? And for HNI client, what are the requirements? Of course, client per se in the secondary market is not but different, but in primary market, for retail investors, there is a separate mechanism how you can bid, or for HNI investor, how you can bid. This is the way. Now, as far as ecosystem is concerned, of course, we have told about disclosure-based mechanisms are already there in the primary market, and all companies are being, investors are being informed well in advance. Now, what is the, and even risk parameters also there in mutual fund market. On this, again coming to the secondary market, when the brokers are dealing on the exchange, and SEBI has prescribed, the audit is being done for the broker. And in terms of technology, where Mr. Dangeri said, how we can use the technology for giving comfort to the investors. So, of course, all of you know, as soon as the trade happens, you get SMS or alert. Now, even the stock exchanges have been told, even brokers also has to say, what is the balance of security, balance of funds. So those SMS alerts are being given to the investors. So they should know what is my position of funds and what is my position of securities. Those SMS alerts are coming from the exchange, and we work jointly with the SEBI. So that's the way technology is being used, because now even SEBI is also told settlement should move from T+2 to T+1. That is another things to protect the investors, because you are going to get your money from the stock exchanges very quickly. The way now derivative settlement is on T+1, even your cash market settlement also happen T+1. So that way you are getting your money and securities on T+1. That is another thing we are going further for investor protection. And of course, there technology is also helping. Another is interoperability, which has been introduced by SEBI. So they're also trying to reduce where, because you put collateral at only one clearing corporation, your cost of capital reduces. And that cost saving enables the broker to give better service to the investor ultimately. Investor is getting benefit, because broker need not keep same collateral with both clearing corporation. You just keep it one clearing corporation, and efficient use of collateral. That also helps ultimately investors. So these are the, I would say, more policy measure which being driven by the SEBI through stock exchanges, and which helps the investors in terms of protection, overall ecosystem. Now coming to the disclosure-based mechanism, one or two examples I will give, because I think Nehal Vora also touched based on how the depositories are also doing a lot of program. E-voting. E-voting is a very important, powerful tool which is given to you as the retail investors through stock exchange, through SEBI and depository, where you can exercise lot of control on the company, whether doing related party transactions, compensation to CEO, whether you will vote for such resolutions, or you propose, no, you're going to vote against or vote favor. Now SEBI also created the framework. Of course, there is no role of stock exchange, but I just want to put out that point of proxy advisory firms. Now, proxy advisory firms, they are not acting as activism, but they bring lot of awareness among the retail investors, because you can go to their website, they will say which resolution is good, which resolution is bad, whether you should go for it, or you should vote for it, or you should not vote for it. Of course, they are independent, they give you, they also operate under the framework of SEBI, where I want to bring to the attention, which is very important, because at times we are not aware of that, such resolution being moved by the company, company siphoning of fund to his group company, related party transactions, royalty payment is being made, higher compensation is given to the CEO, all those things are there. But these proxy firms also plays very important role, and they're also, I would say, of course, they take a lot of data from the exchanges, all corporate announcement take from the exchanges, and they have their own mechanism. But this information is also there in the public domain, where just I want to emphasize. Corporate governance. Now, corporate governance, I would say Indian standards, the way SEBI has uplifted the India image in corporate governance, I think we are there in the top 3. It is not there either in Singapore, Hong Kong, even in Japan, but our standards on corporate governance requirements are very high, and at times companies do say that it is onerous, but not onerous, because as Dangeti sir said, we have to go with rule-based regime, because it is very important. Principle-based regime may not work, because benefit is there. I am just twisting the fact in a way, because it was said in the opening inaugural session, where people talked about the technology, we talked about the downfall, where Indian market has withstand, though the globally market has taken fall very drastically, but we stand because of retail investors. Retail investors came to the market. People talk about the pandemic. Pandemic is enabled to create more accounts, and new kind of investors have come. Here the one point which even I would say observation of BSE also, the new age investors, which have come to the market, they are well informed, and they are not just following the way FPI is doing. So even FPI is selling, we are there to buy, because our new investors, young investors who are there, they are well informed, they are able to take the decision. I would not say they take high bet. Even if stock is traded at higher PE, they know why it is higher PE, why should they pay the premium. And it justifies, because the valuation has not come down the way it has come down in other markets. So this also coming through the help of technology, because as you know, when the market came down, and as sir said, eKYC enabled this new class of investors to came to the market. Now the question comes, these new investors who have come, they are well informed, they know better than even FPI at times, they understand the company's model, and they are also aware of their rights. So the rights part, which now the social media is creating very, very important role. So no one is being spared, whether it is a stock exchange or regulator, immediately it comes in the media and everyone is on the toss. So the technology, what even sir said, how technology is helping, it helps investors in that way also, because social media plays very critical role, and this new class or new age of investors are going to drive the market in that way, and it going to help. Even the FPI is going to sell, this investor will bring lot of money on the table. And third thing, which a lot of things are there in the pipeline, which SEBI is going to announce sooner or later, but one thing you also aware of that ASBA, because of that LIC IPO, so even from 1st September onwards, you cannot put the bid on the exchange platform, that is not supported by ASBA blocking. That is also indirectly good measures to say what is the level of bidding on IPO, because otherwise people will just put the form and ASBA blocking may not happen. So these are the things, again, is the use of technology. So, and it is possible, it is not like not possible. So that way, technology is going to play a very, very important role in the investor protection. Now, awareness part, which I said I'll deal later on, because awareness part, see, digital webinars are happening, lot of, no, exchange also engages lot of experts and consultants to create awareness. But ultimately, the retail investors, no, they should not be lured by the, nowadays lot of scams are happening, no, phishing is happening. So that is the way we want to bring more awareness. Don't get carried away by those SMS, what even said dabba trading, and no chats happen in WhatsApp group, Telegram group, tips are being circulated. So stay aware of that. And that awareness is something which sometimes it can be discussed on the public forum and may not be discussed public forum. It's a little bit dicey, but those things are very important, and SEBI also takes swiftly so much action against those people or an operator who does all this kind of scam. Third is, people nowadays, of course, not only for securities market, but even other markets also, like people take your OTP, password, Aadhaar card. So those things are very important. You should not feel that it is only for banking transaction. Even recently, one scam has happened in the, where no Demat account has been hacked in one of the popular broking firm, and operator has offloaded his stock or her stock where he has taken position, and through this account, hacking of the account, the transaction happened. So these are the things which you should be aware of that. And for that, I think even cyber securities are being prescribed. So stock exchanges are going to ensure that brokers are having cyber security. They have disaster recovery website also. That way, it will be again protection to the investors. I'll close my talk here, and we can take later on question answer session.